Scuba goes under the sea. The podcast for the inquisitive diver.
Hey there, dive buddies, and welcome to the show. Since becoming closer to and more aware of our blue world, I have noticed how many marvellous foundations, charities and organisations there are doing their bit. Equally so, I've also noticed the commercial entities that are seemingly polar opposite in their thought processes. Or are they? Rather than fighting to enforce a particular view, should we not be putting more effort into working together to not only provide awareness but also protect the ocean's inhabitants? My next guest has been the Managing Director of Sea Shepherd Australia for almost 14 years and is one of the directors of Sea Shepherd Global. Undoubtedly, Jeff Hansen has been involved in multiple discussions from both sides of the fence and on several occasions has found that working with the opposition brings up some unexpected and successful surprises. Jeff, welcome to the show, Chief. How are you doing?
Oh, great. It's really good to be here on Scuba Goat. And yeah, it's great to connect with you, Matt.
You're more than welcome on the show, buddy. And I've got to, right out the gate, I've just got to let everybody know that Jeff, he's gone above and beyond because the kids are out of school at the moment and he's sat in his car to do the recording. Good on you, mate.
Yeah, this is the things you have to do when, young hearts and minds, they just want to run right, and so they should.
Damn right. So, do you want to give us a bit of a background on yourself? And because you're over in Perth at the moment, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm in WA. I mean, this is where I guess I call home now, but I grew up in Melbourne, opposite Darabin Creek, and I spent every day I could down there lifting rocks and catching lizards and snakes and just having a playground down there with my mates. And my first love was dinosaurs, but as I couldn't have them as pets, I quickly moved to reptiles. And I guess I always had a dream of growing up to be a wildlife vet, specialising in reptiles or working in Africa, saving animals from poachers. And for all the wrong reasons, I did a double degree in electronic engineering and computer science at La Trobe Uni in Bundoora. And in reality, it was slowly eating away at me. I worked in Germany, I worked in the States, which was great to see the world. But whenever I watched a nature documentary, I felt ill in the stomach and I thought I couldn't change my life. And then I looked at Steve Irwin's life when he died and I thought, he died at 44, which is quite young, but he led a full life of passion. And I thought, what's the point in living to be 100 and do something you hate?
Yeah, exactly.
That's not a life. And so I started taking steps in other directions. I went and volunteered at Australia Zoo and I was like, well, that's, kind of not really what I want to do. And then I met, I was with my wife, Marina, and we were on the Bunda Cliffs in southern Australia, which stretches for 100 kilometres long and 80 to 100 metres vertical. And looking over the coast there, we saw a mother and a calf southern right whale. And Marina said, I'm going to go back and start to help that Sea Shepherd mob. And, I just learned about Sea Shepherd and was blown away by the words of Paul Watson and the actions of the volunteer crews and what they were doing, actively intervening to stop illegal whaling in the Southern Ocean. And I just had to be a part of it. So, I came back from Australia Zoo. I met Paul Watson in Fremantle and I said to Paul, I've just come back from Australia Zoo. And he said, well, I'm trying to name one of our ships to Steve Irwin. And do you think you could help with that? And I said, well, I've just come back from there. I'll see what I can do with the connections I made. And 2 weeks later, while still working in IT, I saw an email which said, Steve Irwin it is. Jeff, we have permission to name the ship to Steve Irwin. We'll get right on it, Paul. And I was really blown away by I thought, geez, I've only just started taking a step in this direction and look at already what had happened. And then I flew to Melbourne and got the ship ready for campaign, took 10 days off school and watched the Terry Irwin christen and name the ship the Steve Irwin and sail away to Antarctica to defend the whales from the Japanese harpoons. And it broke my heart not being on it. But on the third leg of that campaign, I got to go down to Antarctica and see one of the most beautiful places on the planet, an ancient world of ice and minkies, southern right whales, humpbacks, blue whales, chunks of ice with the Adelie penguins on them, and orcas storming through like the wolves of the sea. Just incredible and nature, and it gave me a taste of what our oceans were like before us, and I strongly believed, we were heading in a position where I believe was away from where the Japanese whaling fleet was, and I presented my hypothesis to Paul Watson, and we changed course. And I kind of was caught up in the moment and stood back and thought, geez, what if I was wrong? but luckily we had harpoon ships on the radar, trying to take us away from our position, sitting in the fog. And then Paul asked me for what I believe the factory whaling ship to be, the Nishin Maru, which is the one that if we find the Nishin, we can sit on it and block it from being able to transfer whales. In essence, if they can't load dead whales and they can't kill live ones, and that's one of our most effective tactics down there. And we encountered armed Japanese Coast Guard throwing concussion grenades at us in Australia's Antarctic territory, and we saved over 500 whales. And then I presented a number of ideas on how we could grow Sea Shepherd in Australia, and Paul asked me to run it back in 2008. So and from then it's just been one thing after another, a real baptism of fire.
Was that bit there, where you've gone from sitting looking out over the Bight to being on the ship with Paul and saying we need to go that way instead of this way? Is that all in 1 year? Is that all in 2008?
Yeah, 2006, late 2006 was standing at the Bunda Cliffs.
Okay.
And then 2007 was sort of volunteering at Australia Zoo, and then meeting Paul at the end of 2007, and then February 2008, the third leg of Operation Migaloo, I was on the ship and with Paul, as a quartermaster in the bridge. So it happened quite quickly, and I was definitely not a public speaker, but I started volunteering with the local Fremantle chapter, and it just they just flowed, like all the all the stuff I was kind of keeping inside me about the natural world, because at the time when I met Marina, I met her at yoga. I was training for the West Australian Ironman. I was kind of doing lots of kilometres and on the bike and out running and looking out at nature and thinking I'm going to spend more time doing something with nature. I don't know how or when, but it's definitely it's pulling me in that direction.
It's obviously a very a subject that's very close to your heart and stood you in good stead for the next 14 years.
Yeah, I think we all have it as kids. Our kids that grow up in the world, that we all love the natural world. We're still connected to it, but it's the way society's built that kind of tries to take us away from it and disconnect us from the natural world. And I think that some of us long for it and feel very strongly about it our whole lives. And I've always felt a deep connection to nature, and even some things where I hear about the connection that Aboriginal people have, and I've seen it firsthand that they have to the land and the sea. And some of the things that I've seen you wouldn't believe, where I've walked down, we're in Whale Beach in northern beaches of Sydney, and I was with the Merning elder and whale songman Bunna Laurie, and we left the house together. We walked down to the beach, we stood at the ocean, and he told me there was a big pod of dolphins out there. And I'd seen exactly what he had seen, and looked out together and didn't see anything. And a couple of minutes later, a big pod of dolphins come through. And I think that's the level of connection that we may never understand, that, First Australians have with the land and the sea, and to each other. And one day I was out in the bush, actually in Victoria, up near Panton Hill, going for a bushwalk through there and I stood there and I felt that there was kangaroos in the area, and we're walking along an incline, and I just sensed that they were in the vicinity, right close to us. And then I looked up this hill, and there was about 4 or 5 of them just standing next to the tree, just still, just looking at us. So I think we very much are connected, and I think we've somewhat lost that, and often sometimes you'll be in the garden and you'll be thinking about someone you haven't thought of for years, and then all of a sudden the phone rings and it's them. Like I think it's still there. We've just lost that ability to tap into it. And I know that when James Cameron was, he made that film Avatar, and you can see the connection that the Indigenous group have in the film to the plants and the animals and how it's all connected through a neural network. And, I've read the book, The Hidden Life of Trees, which explains that trees are connected with this fungi neural network where they can communicate with each other. They can ensure that the younger generation of trees don't grow too fast so they get a good foundation. Or if there's, trees in the forest that are not doing well, they can send nutrients to some of those other trees in the forest to help them. And yet I know that when Sam Worthington was, getting ready for that role in Avatar, that he spoke to some local Noongar elders to understand their connection to the land and the sea. So it's real, and it's there, and it's even scientifically proven. It's truly amazing. And then there's the whole, explaining the importance of the natural world to us from it's our life support. It makes it possible for us to live here.
Well, that's it. I mean, we are part of it, isn't we?
Yeah, and I love that. I was with Paul Watson many years ago down in Margaret River in Western Australia, and he sat down with a bunch of school kids, and he said, "Has anyone ever been on a spaceship?" And all the kids are looking around at each other, and he said, "Guess what? You're on one right now. This is Spaceship Earth, hurtling through space. And like any spaceship, there's the passengers and the crew. The crew run this ship. The insects, the worms, the turtles, the sharks, the trees, the plankton, they regulate our climate. They take care of our waste. They provide us with the food that we eat and the air that we breathe. Who are we? We're just the passengers. We're just here having a good old time. Problem is we're killing off the crew. So we've got to protect the crew." And if everyone understood that in business and government and right through the board, we shouldn't need these conservation movements or conservation fights. And we have a government that actually holds the ecology of our planet, right up there, and instead of always focusing on the economy and infinite growth on a finite resource.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Especially when you've got people who just don't have the knowledge and experience of what it's all about, and in effect are completely oblivious to the importance of everything.
But mind you, if they're given the knowledge, they can. Like, I've seen people that have perceptions on Sea Shepherd and be that government, be that industry, and when you just talk to them, not with ignorance, but explain the importance of the natural world and talk about it in different ways, like Sir David Attenborough does with BBC and etc. Like, the more people that have that knowledge, the more that it becomes common, the more that it becomes the new norm. People will start to think about things differently, and we have to change the way we live on the planet. And as we can see, that the money is going to more investment in renewables. The price of coal and oil and gas is definitely, it's not being commercially viable anymore. And the whole saying is change is opportunity in disguise. So you have to be optimistic. And I think we just need to continue the fight as long as we can to have those environmental wins to bite us that time that we wake up.
Talking about environmental wins, I'm dying to get on the topic. Operation Jeddah. I'm just completely fascinated and in awe of this one. Can you give us a bit of a background for those listeners that might not be aware of it?
Yeah, well, 2015, I was in Adelaide. I met a fellow, Peter Owen, who's the director of the Wilderness Society in South Australia, and he said that he'd put a call out to many groups to try and get them to help with a big fight he was facing, which was BP wanting to drill for oil in the Great Australian Bight in waters deeper, rougher, and more remote than the Gulf of Mexico, where they had their massive blowout there. And I also found out that less than 6 months after that big blowout in the Gulf of Mexico, that the Australian government granted leases to BP to drill for oil in the Great Australian Bight, which is just, at the time I really didn't know much about the Bight. So with Murning Elder, Bunalori and Peter Owen and myself, we sat down and formed the Great Australian Bight Alliance and formed the strategy on how we could potentially stop BP from drilling for oil there. And we really looked at, I guess, one of the things that had worked in the Kimberley, which was where we were successful in many other groups and Indigenous as well, in stopping a massive gas hub from going through the middle of the world's biggest humpback whale nursery, was to take the Steve Irwin up there and showcase what we would all lose if the project went ahead. And so, in essence, we put together a voyage of expedition, because when we were Googling these places that we were going to go to, Pearson Island, Noit's Reef, St Francis Isles, Fenelon Island, there was very little information about these places. And so, yeah, we basically launched the campaign Operation Jeddara. And the reason we called it Jeddara was because Mooney Elder Bunalori, he told us the story of the great white whale Jeddara, which went into the Great Australian Bight along the waters there and breathed life into the land and the sea, and that all the marine life that are in the Bight through that area go there to honour the journey of the great white whale Jeddara. Mm-hmm. And what's there in the Bight is it's nature on steroids. I mean, it's one of the last big intact marine wilderness areas left on the planet. You're talking deep sea canyons, updrailing of nutrients, giant squid, orcas, sperm whales, blue whales, humpbacks, one of the world's most significant southern right whale nurseries. You know, seals, dolphins, penguins, sharks, mako sharks, great white sharks. The place is truly remarkable. And the offshore islands there, places like Pearson Island, the welcoming party there is Australian endangered sea lions rushing out to meet you. There's long-nosed fur seals. There's, you know, black-footed rock wallabies, peninsula dragons, Cape Barren geese. And then, you know, I've been diving there with, the South Australian Parks team, and the water quality is incredible, the visibility, and then the marine life there. It's just so healthy and rich. You know, harlequin fish and southern blue devils, and it's just, and when we arrived at Pearson, which was 70 kilometres off the coast, off the Eyre Peninsula, you had to wait for the right conditions to land at that beach there, and even then it was quite tricky. And there's so many rocks where there's baby seals underneath them, be that Australian sea lions or the long-nosed fur seals, and it shows that if there was a spill in the Bight, and the spill modelling showed it could impact much of southern Australia, from Western Australia right around to New South Wales, that places like Pearson, which are on par with the Galapagos, would be lost. They'd be. We got to put it into perspective there as well, because as a non-Aussie, I've only been here 3 years, so I've done a lot of learning in the last 3 years. But prior to that, I knew literally nothing about Australia. So there's a lot of people that listen to this show that are outside Australia. And to give them an idea of the size of the location we're looking at, when BP did their estimates on what would occur should a spill occur, i.e. how far the oil damage would stretch, it's over 12,000 kilometres. It's huge.
12,000 is crazy.
Because you're dealing with a sea state that is the biggest in the world. The 40s, the 50s, the 60s, there's nothing between Australia and Antarctica.
Yeah.
And you're dealing with, deep seas. And there is, in the Gulf of Mexico, you've got quite an industrial area where there's plenty of other vessels and support rigs to handle a spill. But in the Great Australian Bight, there's nothing. There's no oil and gas there. So if there was a blowout, there's nothing there to handle the impact. And you're not going to be able to do anything about a spill there because of the sea state, the conditions, the canyons, etc. So all you're going to be able to do is spray dispersant everywhere. And when you know that the dispersants, that some of them were used in the Gulf of Mexico, made the spill 52 times more toxic. So this stuff, and even BP, when they, through an FOI request that was done, found that BP actually said that, one of the benefits if there was a spill would be to create jobs in the cleanup effort. I mean, and the NOPSEMA actually wrote back and said, look, I think you better take that bit out. but in the end, BP pulled out, and then the next cab off the rank was Chevron. They pulled out, and then we had Equinor, which was formerly known as Statoil, a Norwegian company, and they were the last big oil and gas company to pull out. So there's still a number of leases there. We're still working on it. We want to see a greater protection for the Bight, and we want to see an end to seismic in our oceans. seismic is so destructive to our marine life, from plankton right through to whales. And
Do you want to explain that to me, mate?
yeah, so seismic is something that is used by a lot of the oil and gas companies to, effectively, blast, sound waves through down to the ocean floor and then get a readout so they can see what, where there are oil and gas deposits in the ocean. But, a lot of the sonic blasts and the impact that it does, it has shown to actually cause impact to cetaceans right through to plankton. We're talking about animals that are, could be sperm whales and all sorts of other whales where it causes hemorrhaging in the brain. And effectively, they just have to get out the ocean, and often they strand or beach themselves. And autopsies have shown, blood coming out frequently through their ears and causing hemorrhaging of the brain. The other type of noise in our oceans is obviously sonar from our submarines and Navy operations as well. That has a big impact on cetaceans as well. There's been footage of documentation of, a Navy vessel going through and a pod of orcas just storming towards the coast to get out of the water because of the noise that's just impacting them so badly.
Wow.
And then there's shipping noise as well, which, our ships all over the world. And it's really well documented in the film Sonic Sea. And it just showcases, the impacts that humans have had on our oceans through sound, because, our world is very much driven by sight. We're up here and we can see as far as light can travel, out into the galaxies. And like air is an incredible medium for light, our oceans and water is an incredible medium for sound, where blue whales used to be able to communicate with each other from one side of the planet to the other. And so when you think about that is their way to navigate and communicate, that we're deafening out the oceans. And that's so sad that we've done that. And like, because of ignorance. And what we're seeing now is that even fishing companies like, the tuna or other rock lobster, etc., that they're actually asking, they're joining forces to see inquiries up, which just got up recently. There's an inquiry got up on seismic in our oceans from Senator Peter Whish-Wilson of the Greens. And the reason he got that inquiry up because of backing from the commercial fishing sector, because they're seeing the impacts of seismic on their fisheries as well, because it's impacting lobsters and plankton. And so even in some cases, they're asking to be compensated when oil and gas companies have come through and done their seismic work. So, yeah, it's another can of worms that we need to address. I mean, best way to look after the oceans is just leave it alone.
Just talking about the Bight there, I did watch the video that goes with Operation Jadera. In fact, I've watched it probably 6 times now in the last week.
Oh, wow.
I think it's fantastic. And I urge anyone to watch it. The thing that I actually really loved about it was when the old boys sat up on top of the Bight looking out to sea. And we talk about, as you mentioned earlier, Jadera being a white whale. And lo and behold, there's a white calf that rocks up in front of him and stays for an hour or two, doesn't it? Yeah,
so as I mentioned, we named the campaign Operation Jadera, and in honour of Bunalori and the Merning and their dreaming. And when we arrive at Header Bight, which is, you can stand there at the platform and count at the time 50, 60 mother and calf pairs of southern right whales with their calves. Incredibly important nursing grounds there. And often you'll even see because you get some big sharks through there, you get huge, great whites. And they'll come in trying to look for an opportunity to, grab one of the calves. And so they've noticed that the mothers will actually form a group and put the calves in the middle and protect the calves that way.
Yeah.
But Bunalori, our Merning older, was standing at the edge of the cliffs, and he was, using his clapsticks and singing and doing ceremony and welcoming the whales in, because that relationship goes back to, thousands of years to millennia. And he was standing there and he had a mother come over, southern right whale, and sit right in front of him, and a white calf right in front of him. And so I remember standing there. We designed the logo for the campaign, and I very much wanted it to be very have an emotional feel and connection with it. And so the logo had the Bunder Cliffs, which stretch for 100 kilometres long, 80 to 100 metres vertical, turquoise ocean, and Jetta of the white whale. And I'm standing there at Head of Bight with a Merning alder, and we've got our T-shirts on with the logo on it, and here's a white calf right in front of us. It's just
uncanny.
Remarkable.
You stood inside your own logo.
Yeah, and I just think there's too much of that happens, for it to be coincidence.
Yeah. I've got to agree. I mean, and I'm sure there's many divers out there as well that probably think the same. As you go looking for particular species when you want to film them or take camera shots or anything like that, or even just experience it. And those times, and I've had a few now where you've been in the water and there's been quite a lot of other divers, and let's say, for example, a whale shark or a manta ray is off in the distance, or even more recently a mola, and you see the cavalry charge of all the divers chasing after it to live the experience. And on several occasions just had that little moment in my head thinking, oh, she's going to turn left in a minute, and you end up just swimming at 90 degrees away from everyone. And the dive guides or your dive buddies are like, what the hell do you think you're doing? It's going that way. It's okay, come this way. And sure enough, it comes back round, and you have that little moment, and you can still see the cavalry charge following the whale shark as she comes over and gives you a little wink on the way past. And it's a sensational feeling. And it's almost like this link that you're talking about. That's what I feel. I feel like there's a link there too. Special moments.
Yeah, I think animals can sense it. When we're quiet, it's a bit like they talk about great whites that can tell when we're calm, when our heart rates are racing. And I think that's the same with nature. They can sense how people are reacting and responding. I often find with diving, I get frustrated being in a dive group where you're constantly on the move.
Yeah.
I like to just sometimes sit and watch and see what happens. A bit like being traveling in Europe, and you find a nice plaza or plucker and just sit there and watch the world go by and watch the day-to-day happenings of life. And that's the thing, you're a visitor in the world, in the oceans, at some reef or some ecosystem or some particular area, which is a number of animals' home, and they're going about their daily lives. And to spend some time, I'd rather spend half an hour sitting in one spot and just watching, and see what evolves.
Quite a lot of people in Papua New Guinea do that, especially the older divers that didn't want to move around, just sit them on top of the reef, 4 or 5 metres, leave them there for an hour and a half. We loved it.
Yeah.
Watch the world go by.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. And I mean, it's interesting, like you hear those stories where, someone that's looked after elephants for, much of their life and been a caretaker for elephant, orphans, etc. And then that particular person has passed away. And the day that they pass away, a whole group of elephants have come back into camp and paid their respects. And no one's, sent them an SMS or anything. And there's so many stories like that.
Yeah.
That they have this connection as well,
G'day Scuba Goat listeners, Rod here, producer of the show. I hope that you're enjoying this episode and that you're subscribed and following the pod on your favourite app. Please keep an eye out for the all-new Scuba Goat website coming soon. Now, back to Matt and the show.
Let's have a look at some of the campaigns, shall we?
Let's go.
All right. I'm just going to list them off if you want to give a bit of a background to them and a bit of an overview. How's that?
Sounds good.
Ready? Operation Dolphin Bycatch.
Yeah, so that's led up by our French director, Lamia, and she's one of our 6 global directors, to document what's happening with the, it's a legal fishing fleet of France, but bycatch of upwards of 10,000 dolphins a year. So showcasing what's going on there, which is, and even sometimes bringing dolphin carcasses into the heart of Paris to say, well, this is still going on, and this is the impact that our of eating seafood is having. We go on about Taji, and here's 10,000 dolphins getting killed every year by illegal fishery off our coast. So, yeah, and even to the point we had New York Times on one of our ships. And we had a fisherman saying, "Oh, we never catch them because we've got pingers in our nets." And this particular fisherman pulled in a net with New York Times on board, and there was a dolphin caught in the net. So yeah, it's been a very successful campaign, and even featured in Seaspiracy.
Yeah. And it's still occurring every year, isn't it? It's not been resolved yet.
Yeah, it's still ongoing, and it's still gathering more and more support from within France to put pressure on the government to see some action. So, yeah, it's still ongoing.
What is it with? I know we're going to talk about the other operations and campaigns and whatever, but what is it with governments? Why can't they actually listen? From your experiences, you must have spoken with a few of them, or at least communicated with them. Why is there such? Why do they avoid actually taking action and just stopping all the crap that's going on?
I think because they don't like to choose one side or the other, and often governments will choose industry over NGOs and conservation. So that's you need to build up a campaign to the point that it's so strong that it becomes political, that it's going to be, they're going to not get certain key people in those seats back in the next election. So ultimately, very few governments do the right thing, as in what's best for humanity and best for the nation, because they're worried about the impacts on the next election. So, and you do have, for instance, wreck fishermen and commercial fishing are a very powerful voice in Canberra, and we also have an issue where we have political corporate donations as well. So that's another big impact that the Greens have fought to try and stop corporate donations at a government level, but both the Labor and the Liberal parties have blocked that because they get those donations, and that impacts political decisions as well. So there's a lot of stuff that needs to be sorted to stop us having these fights.
It needs someone with a bit of balls in Parliament to say enough's enough, isn't it?
Yeah, and every time that they have tried, in the past, even to try and see some real action on climate, then they've seen certain seats where they still want to have a coal mine and they're worried about coal jobs, et cetera, that they're going to lose those seats in those positions. So it's sometimes political suicide to do the right thing. But then there is the fact that these governments and people at times haven't gone into these areas and say, look, we're going to have these announcements. We need to shift away from coal. It's not good for your health with black lung disease. It's not good on the planet, but you're not going to be left without a job. We're going to transition you. We're going to work towards getting you out of this industry, like Germany have done with closing down coal there. So it's just a lack of, I think, vision and communication and strategy. And I think the 3-year term doesn't help as well. Yeah.
So it's fear of missing out on seats and the money that comes with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned coal there as well. I'm just looking through the list. There's Operation Reef Defence. That's the one to do with the GBR, isn't it?
Yeah. So that's the Adani coal mine, Adani Carmichael coal mine. We're part of the Stop Adani Alliance, and effectively where they were going to. They're still, it's being slowed up as much as we can. But massive coal mine up there from Adani, an Indian company that muscling in on building this massive coal mine and having huge ships go in and out and across the Great Barrier Reef. So yeah, we're part of that alliance, and the way that that's worked is really just we took the Steve Irwin up to the coast to raise awareness and show support of that fight, and then also with the alliance, they're working behind the scenes to try and stop in certain companies and banks from providing insurance and financial support to that project. So it's definitely, an ongoing fight. But yeah, I just don't see how coal is commercially viable anymore, and it's the same with gas as well.
And this is coal that's just been, delivered back to India, isn't it? It's not for use here.
Yeah, that's correct. And I think there's quite a lot of the coal was going to be used for some, producing some plastic plant as well to make more plastic. So,
Really?
In terms of, the energy required as well. So yeah, coal is it's just got to go, and it's moving that way globally. But, Australia, if you measure our emissions in terms of, what also we export and leave the country, we're basically one of the world's worst polluters per capita. And our action on climate is ranking about dead last.
It's ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, the size of the country and the natural sort of resources we've got here with the sunlight, and there's so much more that can be done.
Yeah, we have a country that has so much sun, so much wind, and so much resources in terms of mining and what we could pull out of the ground to make more, batteries and electricity. There's all this opportunity for growth and jobs in the renewable sector. Recently, we've closed down, Holden and other car manufacturing plants here, when we should have been on the front foot and transition them to electric cars. Like, Australians really want to get on board and buy electric cars, but a lot of the cars come from outside Australia, and as a result, they're hit with huge luxury car taxes. So the Australians really want to get on board with this, but they're let down by the government.
Yeah.
So, and there's just all this opportunity right here in this country to be a leader in renewables and even car manufacturing and everything, but it doesn't get the support because of decades and decades of fossil fuel companies going into Canberra with their political donations, and then those industries are subsidised and a huge amount. Yeah.
Well, fingers crossed we'll get someone who could. I'll tell you what, you take his job. You sort it out.
I have been approached a couple of times, but I just feel a lot of politicians end up doing, things that are, so wasting so much time on areas that, dealing with slush funds and what someone's secretary is up to, as opposed to actually doing the work. And I think that's the thing I like about Sea Shepherd is, we can produce real tangible results for the oceans, and we're becoming more and more effective every day.
Indeed. Now, I did mention in my introduction to the episode about how you've worked with industry to come to resolutions before, and I think it was during your TED Talk, or it was a video. I've lost count of how many videos I've watched now in the last week. But there's one in particular that actually struck a chord with you. Would it be fair to say that? Yeah,
so we've been successful in stopping whaling in the Southern Ocean. And, the Australian government and New Zealand government, kudos to them. They took Japan to the International Court of Justice and found Japan's whaling to be illegal. In the end, they did pull out, and, over a decade of campaigning, we saved the lives of over 6,000 whales, and the Southern Ocean Whale Sanctuary is, in fact, a sanctuary for the whales. But those campaigns took up a huge amount of time, money, and resources that meant we couldn't do really anything else. And when we got back from an Antarctic mission in March, we were pretty much getting ready till December to get ready to go again. So with the end of whaling, we looked at illegal fishing in the Southern Ocean, and namely the Patagonia Antarctic toothfish poaching, a deep-sea codfish, which is sought after for its white, oily flesh, very little bones, otherwise known as Chilean sea bass in the restaurants. But there were 6 vessels wanted by Interpol that were out there, flouting the laws, fleeing and unable to be, detained. Interpol was after them, and within a couple of days of reaching the searching grounds, our vessel, the Bob Barker, captained by Peter Hammerstead, found the most notorious poacher, the Thunder. And we notified the Thunder, you're not supposed to be here, you're illegal, there's an Interpol purple notice out for you. And they said, we're just transitioning, we're just passing through. And it's like, you've just dumped all your gill nets, and you're on the run. And they just ran. So the Bob Barker began pursuit. And our vessel, the Sam Simon, they also they came in and found the location of the thunder's gill nets and pulled them in over about 3 weeks in icy cold conditions, and those nets stretched for 72 kilometres long.
72K?
72 Ks long, yeah.
Jesus.
But that sea chase stretched for 110 days at sea. And during that sea chase, I'd recently met the guys from Austral Fisheries, one of the legal toothfish companies, and they had perceptions on us and we had perceptions on them. They thought we were a bunch of cowboys and just there for media. And they quickly learnt that, hang on, you guys have reached the search grounds, found the most notorious poacher, and you're onto them. You're notifying governments, you're notifying Interpol to come out and arrest the ship. And so I guess a bit of a relationship it developed between David Carter, the CEO of Austral Fisheries, and myself. And we realised that we saw the same key threats to the oceans and more: illegal fishing, plastics, climate, and threats to vulnerable and endangered species. So David said, well, we've got a vessel leaving Norway en route to Mauritius. Perhaps we might be able to rendezvous and join up with the chase. And so one morning, the Thunder captain woke up and found 2 conservation ships and an industry ship on his stern. and that sent a very powerful message, because, you know, it's one thing for conservation ships to be, you know, chasing poachers on the high seas, but an industry ship, that was something new.
Yeah.
And so that sent a very powerful message out there. And which was fantastic, you know, to see that. And even the words that the captain of the Austral ship said to the captain of the Thunder were really inspiring, saying, we've got to look after the sea. You've got to stop taking and do the right thing by our children. And the captain of the Thunder was definitely shaken by it. And in the end, he scuttled his own ship off the principal island nation of Sao Tome, and we had to rescue the crew and took them into the authorities. And the officers got 3 years jail and 15 million euros in fines. But in about 2 years, we had, the 6 vessels wanted by Interpol were all out of action. A number we found in port. We found them in the Southern Ocean, and then we located them in port, and then we notified the authorities, and they went out and detained the ships. One vessel, the Viking, we found in Indonesia's waters. We notified the fisheries minister at the time, Susie. She sent out the Navy, detained it, and then subsequently blew it up. So, and those campaigns gave birth because of one of the countries that said they would arrest the Thunder was Gabon if it came in its waters. That chase of the Thunder gave birth to discussions with Gabon, which then led to the now 8 government partnerships we have in Africa, which is producing incredible results for oceans.
Yeah, now that's a huge element of Sea Shepherd right now, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's, I think, testament to Peter Hammerstead, our head of campaigns globally, and was the captain of the Thunder, and his vision as well, backed up by our global directors, that Gabon had a very small coast guard. They couldn't patrol their entire 200 nautical mile EEZ. But they had, EU fishing fleets operating in their waters that pay money to fish there, but they never inspected some of these vessels because they couldn't get out there and reach them, even though they were welcome to, or go out and stop illegal fishing vessels coming into their waters. So we said, well, we've got the ship, the mostly volunteer crew and the fuel, and you've got the authority. So why don't we partner up? And so in essence, we provide the tools in order for them to make the arrests. We also provide a training platform. We bring expertise on board to be able to assist with that training, Israeli defense expertise as well. And in the end, they've been so successful, those partnerships in Gabon, over 4 years ago now, that we have 8 government partnerships in Africa. And we've facilitated the rest of, over 60 illegal fishing vessels. And in terms of tangible outcomes, in places like Liberia, the artisanal fishermen, they can see the fish returning for the first time in decades.
You've literally just taken the words out of my mouth. I was going to ask that very question.
Yeah, and they're actually, these people live on the beaches in tin huts. They have nothing else but a livelihood to either eat or to as their livelihood to catch fish, to sell, to get their kids to school. This is all these people have, and they've been yelling at the governments for years for help because they've had these massive trawlers come through and industrial fleets running over their wooden canoes, sometimes killing them. Even recent stories of Chinese fleets coming through there and pouring petrol on them and setting them alight. I mean, just crazy stuff. And so to be able to help, not only is it great from a conservation perspective and protecting, these incredible, unique marine wilderness areas, but also to, the impact on local artisanal fishermen. The president of Liberia gave us the highest military honour for our work tackling illegal fishing there. And then also, once again, just showcasing the impact that we're seeing with illegal fishing. There's such a link with slavery, so much of illegal fishing fleets out there, there's slaves on board because the fishing fleets that have travelled further and further to get the catch because they've fished out waters closer to home, they can't get their costs of their maintenance of the ship down. They can't get their fuel costs down, but they can get the costs of their crew down by simply not paying them.
Yeah.
And if you don't like it, they'll throw you overseas and some people have been at sea for 5 years and not able to get home.
Yeah. That's crazy, isn't it?
It is.
But what with what you're doing in Africa there, it's a huge deterrent as well, isn't it? So where it's been pilfered, and then just having that presence there now of having boats in the water that have got people on board that can take action and inspect the vessels. Those that are trying to dodge the legal routes, I'm sure are staying more vigilant and if not, staying well out of the way.
Yeah, well, I mean, it only takes a handful of arrests and the word gets out. And even the legal ones, the ones with licenses to be there in some places, have been leaving the entire EEZ because they don't want to be inspected. So there's that huge, opportunity there that you can protect a vast area of marine ecosystem. It's huge. And David Attenborough on the recent A Perfect Planet episode 5, where he narrates our work in Africa, and he talks about how we arrested one vessel, the Libico 2, which was set up to process deep sea sharks for shark liver oil, and that vessel had the ability to wipe out over 500,000 sharks a year.
Yeah. And
with one arrest, we were able to save that. And so, David's talking about the importance of sharks in our oceans, and also that the healthier our oceans are, the more rich and biodiverse they are, the greater they stand a chance in fighting against the impacts of climate as well as the world's greatest carbon sink. So it all ties in, with the more, illegal fishing vessels that we stop and the breather that we give our oceans also ties in with the climate fight, as well as our work in the Bight and our work cleaning up our beaches around Australia and, working with Indigenous rangers in Arnhem Land, removing tons and tons of marine debris and nets from critical sea turtle nesting habitat and sacred country to the Yolngu people.
Where was that huge haul of rope you guys dragged in? See, I've watched too many videos now.
There was one. You're probably thinking of the one off Cocos Keeling Islands.
That's it.
Where it was a huge, looked like a big mooring line, or it was a huge amount of rope that was just took our team a lot of effort to get in out of the ocean.
That was ridiculous.
But yeah, Cocos it's been tough for our crew going, volunteers there, getting there and cleaning up there, because they're just so amazed by how much rubbish and marine debris is washing up on the coast there. And there's still beautiful parts of Cocos that I guess a bit sheltered from the rubbish, and still a beautiful place to go and visit, but there's still a lot of work to do to clean it up, and a lot of that trash there is coming from Asia. But our crew, I spoke to them as they were there, and they felt in such despair because they're cleaning up the beaches, and some of the plastic they're pulling off the beaches just disintegrates in their hands. And as they're pulling it up, cleaning it up off the beach, they're looking out to sea and they can see more just coming and coming and coming.
Yeah.
And they're like, what's the point? And it's like, well, not fighting these fights is not an option. You just, to know where our planet's headed and do nothing, that's just suicide. We've just got to do what we can. And same mentality we had with previous wars. You know, we didn't go, well, the opposition's too big and what's the point? We just give up. No, we all fought. And I think that's the whole message here, is if there's one thing worth fighting for on this planet, it's life and looking after the natural beauty of our world. And yeah, we've made a mess, but we've got to start somewhere, you know, and start cleaning it up.
For sure. Yeah. And do you think the younger generations that are coming through are much more aware than those that are, you know, our age and older? Are they more open to listen?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm inspired by, I think the curriculum now is teaching more kids about the natural world and the impacts, what's happening with plastics and climate, et cetera, et cetera. We have the school strikers out there on the street calling for action on climate. I was part of a panel a couple of weeks ago talking about climate. I sat next to a girl that was 15 years old that just took the Australian government to the federal court and found that the Australian Federal Environment Minister has a duty of care for future generations. Mm. And so, yeah, that's at 15, I was nowhere near doing stuff like that. So, yeah, it's inspiring to see where kids are at and what's coming down the line. And to me, that gives me a lot of hope, because I think, yeah, we're having some great environmental wins, but environmental wins are only temporary because you live to fight them another day. But if we've got this younger generation coming through and we can hold the line and we can bide a small time for more of us to wake up, and those younger generation voting more for the planet, then hopefully our jobs will get a lot easier in the future.
Operation Pahu?
Yeah, so that's in New Zealand. We've got the last of the we got the Maui dolphins, which are probably one of the most endangered small dolphins in the world. They're incredibly important to Maori culture. Then we've got, you know, all the different other small species of dolphins that are being impacted by fishing gear and fishing nets over there, caught in the gill nets as well. So our team in New Zealand's there just trying to see what we can do to raise awareness about, you know, if nets are being put in the wrong place or placed in exclusion zones that are supposed to be, you know, net free for the local, you know, Maui and Hector dolphins. So yeah, there's a lot of good work we're doing there. It's only a small team in New Zealand. There's no one paid over there, but they do regular beach cleanups and do what they can. Absolutely. So, and New Zealand's obviously had a lot of crew members over the years, you know, on our boats down in the Southern Ocean, defending the Southern Ocean whale sanctuary, be that Australian and New Zealand, Antarctic territory, places like the Ross Sea, etc. So, yeah, it's and I think that's where, you know, Paul Watson started Sea Shepherd in 1977. You know, and it was really, I don't think Paul expected it to get where it's got today. It was kind of get a ship and go out and find the pirate whaling vessel, the Sierra, the most notorious poaching vessel, and locate that vessel and take it out of action, which he did, and, you know, which was just remarkable back in the day what Paul did. And I guess it's really grown from a Save the Whales movement to a Save the Oceans movement. And it just gets stronger and stronger. It's funding is always an issue. Like I think Sea Shepherd historically has been incredibly good at delivering results and probably lacks the funding to support it, but we're definitely something that we're working on.
Yeah. And it's ever evolving. That's the thing. I mean, everything grows from somewhere, and Paul started it, and look at the size of it now. Where's it going to be in another 30, 40, 50 years?
I think that's the thing with Paul, is that, you know, when I facilitated the naming of the vessel to Steve Irwin, and I spent like 2 weeks and, you know, always, you know, working really hard to get that outcome happen. The email I got from Paul was, "Hi, Jeff, we have permission to name the ship the Steve Irwin. We'll get right on it, Paul." And I read it and I went, "Oh, wow, that's amazing." But then I read it again and was like, he didn't even say thanks. and then I understood Paul's mentality really early on as the founder of Sea Shepherd. I didn't do it for Paul. I wasn't doing it for him. I was doing it for the movement and doing it for the oceans. And that's the thing I really understood really early on about Sea Shepherd and also about Paul, is that, he asked me to, be the, run Sea Shepherd in Australia back in 2008, and he's never micromanaged me. And he said that the best thing to do with power is just to give it away.
Yeah.
And that's the way that Sea Shepherd has been able to operate the way we've done over the years on a budget globally of about $15 million, because it's about imagination and passion and, people from all over the world, mostly volunteers, a handful of staff globally. And that sort of ethics and values is from the top all the way through. Like our 6 global directors have all been on the front line. They've all been on the ships, be that in Antarctica, off Africa. They've all been on the front line defending our oceans. So they all come with a love of the natural world, a deep understanding of its ecological importance, and, a real passion for being lean and effective. I mean, I'm the managing director for Sea Shepherd Australia. I'm one of the 6 global directors, and yet I run Sea Shepherd from a donated office desk in Fremantle from a company that UDLA, Urban Design Landscape Architects. They're passionate about what we do. They said, look, there's a free desk, free coffee, free internet. Go for it. And I love that. I love that we can be, not have these big offices. And, when we meet donors, we can say hand on heart, that they're part of this, they're part of the victories. These victories are as much our supporters and donors as our crew on the front line. And, we're not building all this capacity in terms of big offices and wasting donors' money.
Yeah, it's been put to good use.
Has to be.
Not political seats.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important, it's important to say hand on heart that, I wouldn't waste my time with an organisation that wasn't delivering tangible results and wasn't true to its values right down the line. Our ships are all plant-based ships. There's no meat or animal products on our ships. Our merchandise is all eco-ethical, right down the line, organic cottons and dyes and no sweatshops, etc. And any Sea Shepherd event always has to be plant-based, So we follow everything right down the line.
Yeah. It's good to see. And there's plenty of, you talk about the volunteers and everyone doing their good bit around the country and indeed around the world. I see a lot of markets and market stalls being very active here in Australia, and I think it's marvellous, absolutely marvellous.
Well, these volunteers are, they're mums and dads and people with lives, and they're giving up their spare time to get up sometimes it's dark, to pack the car, to go down to the local markets and raise funds and awareness. They're on no commission, they're not paid.
Yeah.
Or they're organising a clean-up, and they get down, they clean up the beach, but then they've got to go home and get all the gloves and all the tubs and everything and wash it all out and get it dried for the next time and do a clean-up. These people are getting paid nothing.
Yeah.
And that's when you think, in my position, I've done all that as well, but it's also, I feel lucky that I've done every role in Sea Shepherd that we have now paid in Australia. So that comes with a great level of respect and understanding and appreciation for what they do. But also when we have our volunteers out there working so hard because they know that we're lean and effective, but that also keeps me honest as well.
Yeah. To
know that there's people out there that are giving up so much. So we have to be, true to our values all the way down the line.
Yeah. And I applaud each and every one of them. Bravo.
Oh, thanks, mate.
Jeff, I think we'll wrap it up for now. However, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks, Matt.
It's
been a real delight.
Spending a good portion of your afternoon sat in your car.
Well, I'm just parked right opposite the Swan River, and in fact, looking out over the dash, all I can see is water. So,
beauty.
And this is often I run through here on my morning run sometimes, or ride.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen bottlenose dolphins here, and I've even seen the odd bull shark in the shallows here.
Ooh.
So, yeah,
lovely stuff.
Beautiful. It's a good place to live. But thanks, Matt, for having us on the show, mate. I've really enjoyed meeting with you and connecting with you. And however we use the ocean for oxygen or diving or whatever, we've got to be custodians for our oceans. They are
100%.
our primary life support.
100%. And I openly invite any Sea Shepherd representative to come on the show and tell me their experiences as well. I'd really enjoy that. We've got a new website coming out soon, and it all has small bio pages. So, for example, this episode, Jeff's episode, we'll have a little bio on Jeff and a few quick-fire questions, but all the links to Sea Shepherd and everything that we've spoken about in the show will be in there as well. And the same goes for anyone else who comes on the show. So put the word out in Sea Shepherd, get them on board. I've been more than keen to have them tune in and create some more magic.
That sounds great, Matt. I know they'd love to sign up and have a chat, and we'll see where this relationship leads. But it's all good stuff.
All good stuff. All exciting.
Yeah.
Oh, hey! I tell you what, I didn't ask you before you go. Scuba Goat. I keep forgetting to ask the question. Greatest of all time dive. Probably the most difficult question you're going to get asked this year.
Yeah, that's. I feel very spoilt because I've dived the Galapagos. It was my first dive, which was quite remarkable. And I've done snorkeling in Tonga with humpbacks, and I've done snorkeling in Exmouth with whale sharks and manta rays, which was probably one of the most enjoyable experiences. Just laying in the water. It wasn't diving, I was just snorkeling, but I had, mantas just coming through one after the other. Probably about 30 of them in a feeding pattern. And they were probably 10 meters away from me at the start, but in the end they were right next to me where I had to move back. Otherwise they were gonna hit me. I really enjoyed that experience. Diving, I mean, I feel lucky to have dived at Pearson Island. It's such a healthy marine environment, so lush, and just I remember seeing the film crew. They were trying to get some footage for Northern Pictures and filming a piece for ABC, and they were trying to get all the Australian sea lions, and they were all over there and probably about 20 meters away from me, and I just sat on the bottom, and I had 5 or 6 Australian sea lions with me.
Yeah.
I had a female just sitting on the bottom, just looking at me, staring at me, and a big male with a neck that was just so thick, and his face right in front of me. And I just sat there, and I was just like, "How good's this?" Beautiful clear water. I was just relaxed and breathing, and have these sea lions just connecting with me. So yeah, that's probably one of my favorite experiences, diving. Absolutely. It's pretty remarkable stuff of a place that very few Australians know about. And I think that's where you mentioned about the Bight. I've shown footage of the Bight to Australians and people in Hollywood, and Australians have going, how do you not know about this place? Yeah. So yeah, there's people that don't know. See,
there's two sides to it as well, isn't there? You want to tell everyone and show them how amazing it is, but at the same time, let's keep it a nice little secret. It's beautiful. It's absolutely amazing. I'm going to head down there next year.
Oh, you got to do it. And I think that's the thing. Like, there's an element where you want to try and keep things quiet, but when that's sometimes while big industry takes advantage of that, if it's remote and there's few people, so then you're kind of left with the story. You got to tell the story of what and bring these places into the lounge rooms of people all over the world to join the fight. Yeah,
and that's it. I mean, if there's people out there listening to this podcast and they're not involved in Sea Shepherd and they have a genuine passion for what we've been talking about, get involved. Just get on to Sea Shepherd, represent, get involved. There's always something you can help with.
Oh, yeah, plenty of things. And even people that think, well, I can't be on a ship, and you might be even someone that, can't get out there and do much physical work. There's always something that people can do,
For sure. And then those that win the lottery, they can give us a load of money.
It's always, we'll put it to good use, that's for sure.
Yeah. Jeff, again, thank you very much for coming on the show, and I appreciate it immensely. Have a good afternoon, and we'll speak again soon.
You too, Matt. Thanks again. Really enjoyed our chat.
Thanks, man. Bye-bye, everybody.
This is Scuba Goat Under the Sea. the podcast for the inquisitive diver.